Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Safety and Risk Success podcast. And this is a special episode today because it's the first of a series on Sliptember. And if you're thinking, what on earth is Sliptember? It's a good question. But Sliptember is a campaign that I run every September to raise awareness of slip safety throughout the month. So a bit of a play on words. And so I decided that I'd have a series of interviews solely focusing on slips and trips, basically. So today's is the first of those with a guy called Richard McNamara, who runs a business in Ireland called Total Slip Solutions. And they have a similar kind of business to what we do here at Slip Safety Services. Great guy, Richard. He's going to tell us about his background and how he got involved in the industry. We're going to talk about what's happening in Ireland and what the trends are, and the insurance claim landscape and payouts and premiums and things like that. Get into the weeds a little bit in terms of why do slips actually happen, what are some of the common issues that we see and how we can put those right. And then we also have a bit of a chat about some of the, what should we term this as, some of the challenges that we might have with people in our world that purport to be specialists or experts when it comes to slips and falls, but perhaps aren't giving necessarily the best advice in the world. Hope you enjoy this episode and the whole Sliptember series. If you'd like to learn more about Sliptember, you can find some details on LinkedIn or our website, and you'll see a lot of content on social media throughout the rest of this month. Let's get on with my conversation then with Richard McNamara. Hope you enjoy it, and wishing you all a happy Sliptember. Richard McNamara, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much, Christian. Thanks for inviting me along.
Yeah, no worries. You're the first special guest for our Sliptember series of podcasts.
Okay. I hope I don't disappoint.
Starting with a bang. Starting with a bang. That'd be good. It'd be good. I mean, I thought it'd be good to get you on because obviously we've known each other for years. You're a real expert about this subject, and you're working on it in a different country. So it'd be interesting to get some perspectives from there. But do you want to start by giving us a bit of a background on you, and then a bit of an overview of the business, and I guess how you got involved in this world as well?
Yeah, because it is a strange world to become involved in.
It is.
And you know yourself, a lot of people don't really understand what we do.
Yeah.
The company was set up in 2014. I was actually working for a hotel group at the time, so I was involved in maintenance. Going back further than that, I was actually in the London ambulance service and that, so I've got a few different angles. I was also in the construction industry, so various different levels of building work, from groundwork and everything else. So the reason I got into this is we actually had issues within the leisure centre of where I was working. And a company came down with a mop and bucket, threw a bit of a solution down on the floor. Hey presto, you've got a safe floor. I was a little bit skeptical, well, in fact, very skeptical. Yeah. The manager at the time, or the owner, was like, no, we're happy with this product. Let's keep going. Long and the short of it is, the actual company then asked me if I wanted to go and help them to do a couple of jobs around the country. I thought to myself, yeah, this is not a bad idea to get to understand it a bit better. So I'd done this while still working for the hotel, and I basically didn't like what I saw.
Right.
So I started researching and realized that there was a lot more to this business than a bucket of solution, throwing it down, pretending or saying to your customers, there's a 3-year warranty, your floor is safe, happy days, you don't need to change your cleaning routines, work away. That goes against my own thinking, you know?
Yeah.
So I basically researched a lot before I went forward, and then I started approaching companies to look for the right ways and the wrong ways, and start speaking to people that do understand the business.
Yeah.
And it takes a long time to weed out the good from the bad.
Mm.
But anyway, through all that, I set up Total Slip Solutions in 2014. So we've been operating now for 7 years.
Yeah.
And business has grown steadily from there on in. I eventually left the hotel and went full time at this. So pendulum testing has become a daily occurrence for me, and obviously all the offshots of treatments and product supplies and everything else.
Yeah, I was going to say, do you want to give us like a bit of a menu card if you think about being a restaurant? You know, what's on your menu that you do as services or products?
Be fairly similar to yourself, Christian. Obviously, pendulum testing is the biggest part of what we do in terms of assessing your risk and everything else. But we would do a lot of testing for construction, which might be slightly different to what you do yourselves. So we would be on building sites weekly, if not daily. We do a lot of product testing. And then obviously we do testing for insurance companies and leisure centres and retail and that type of thing. And then we do offer specialist cleaning treatments, very much like yourselves. I think one of the things we do that is probably different to yourselves, we supply a lot of GRP. So it's another option. We don't do resin floors or anything like that. We would work with partners if resin floors are required. So we try to help our customers from initial testing and just assessments of the floors and consulting, or if they want us to look into finding a solution if they have a problem, or just for guidance, we're happy to do that. So we try to give, there's no point just saying to somebody, you have an issue, good luck, go off and find a solution. Some people say it's a conflict of interest. You're finding they've got a problem. You're then going, oh, we've got the magic formula and everything else. It's about trying to help the customer to get to where they need to be at the end.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things we were going to do was have a bit of a rant, not a rant, but you know, we were going to just talk about some of the challenges and some of the misconceptions and stuff around the industry that we're in, and actually that you've mentioned that, so let's just pick up on that now, because that's one that I see a lot. Is you know, there's this kind of conflict of interest question between, you know, if you're coming in and doing the slip testing and then you've got a solution, and of course I can see that argument, but there's a counter argument to that as well, which is, as you've said, you know, what's the value of coming in and doing a slip test if all you're doing is showing a problem and then you haven't got a solution? So I think, you know, there's a lot of if you're on the other side of that fence and you're kind of an independent slip testing business, then of course you're going to say, well, companies like ours, you know, you shouldn't trust them because X, Y, and Z. They're just going to try and sell you something. But equally, you know, I had a call, actually Scott Crichton on the podcast the other week. You know, he was saying, you know, I had he's a health and safety consultant for a big consultancy. We had a slip test done in a client's swimming pool. He said it was an absolute waste of time because all it told us was what we already knew, that the floor was slippery.
Yeah, and then off you go trying to find your own solution to that problem. The way I see it, I mean, we test every floor that even if it's just a deep clean, we test that floor and we issue a report. It's sense checking. We need to know what we're achieving while we're working anyway. There's no point us as a company just throwing down products or using different cleaning chemicals without checking what we're achieving, because you can decrease the slip resistance if you use the wrong chemicals. So you need to know that as the process is happening. And in a lot of the ways, if you think about it, an electrician, when they've finished their job, they're signing off on their work. And that's what we're doing. We're signing off our work. The whole point of the pendulum, it's repeatable. So if we're giving you a value, if we're a company that you can't trust, you can have that checked, you know, and there's very, very little difference in our readings to anyone else's readings if they're done properly.
And that's one of the problems, isn't it? That, you know, we're your company, and well, you personally in your company and me personally in my company are both members of the UK slip resistance group, and we stipulate and regulate and check how this is all being done, and we make sure that we're all doing it properly. But most of these other independent companies that claim to be X, Y, and Z aren't members of that group, and therefore can you even trust what they're doing anyway?
No, they're not. Most of them are not members, as you correctly say, but all of them quote within their reports that we followed the guidelines of 𝐂𝐻𝐿𝐏.
Yeah.
But at no point are they engaging with the 𝐂𝐻𝐿𝐏. I don't know why they're not. I mean, most of us within the group are approachable. So people need to pick up the phone or do that email. If they've got something to offer the group, then I'm sure they'd be valued.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, agreed. Yeah, I'm not sure either why these people don't. I don't know. To me, it's always a little bit suspicious if you wouldn't look to join. But anyway, perhaps I'm a cynic.
I think life makes us all cynics at some stage, Christian.
It does. Yeah, it does. Well, let's park that for a minute, because we'll go on and talk about some other myths and whatever. And but it'd be interested to get your perspective on the situation in Ireland. You know, in terms of how big a problem is slip safety there. You know, is it similar to the UK? Bearing in mind there's different sides of the countries, or better or worse. You know, some of the perspectives of perhaps architects and insurers and so on. So how would you sort of describe the situation at the moment?
Well, obviously, I mean, you hit on the point that obviously it's a much smaller country to operate in. You could tend to get to any place in Ireland within 4 hours. You'd be hitting one side to another. Obviously, a lot less people, a lot less buildings, but there is a lot of business. At the moment, there's a lot of movement within insurance and payouts and personal injury assessment board. So there's a big insurance reform happening at the moment, trying to push people to use the personal injury assessment board more, so that the levels of claims are more of an equal rate, because our claim payouts would be a lot higher than in the UK.
Yeah.
And it's a known fact. Ireland does have high claim payouts.
Yeah, different legal system and different, more friendly to claimants than defendants. And I've seen, you know, certainly in the press, we've seen it over the last couple of years. I mean, it's all sort of, well, probably 3 years actually, because probably mostly before the pandemic, but certainly in the leisure and hospitality sector in Ireland, a lot of insurers have been pulling out of that market because they, you know, the losses, the claims for slips and trips have just been so big that they've not been able to make a profit at all, and so they've stopped getting involved in that sector. And that's led, I've seen the articles of businesses, you know, having not being able to get insurance or not being able to afford insurance and going out of business, for example.
Yeah, I mean, premiums have certainly been an issue, and you're correct. There was 2 or 3 leisure centres that had to close their doors, and not just leisure centres, playground areas and farms with activities and them type of places. They've had a nightmare, to be quite honest. I don't know whether it's levelling out. I'm not an expert on the insurance sector. You would certainly be much more involved in that than myself. Saying that, Total Slip Solutions, we have just become a preferred partner with AXA. We're happy to tie in, and I think it's important that slip risk is talked about and dealt with in a much more open way with the insurers, with your clients, with companies like ourselves and yourselves, bringing the 3 parties together. It's certainly a better way to go than it is an anti-slip provider turning up in the middle of the night, doing something and disappearing.
Yeah.
Talk about it. Let them know what you're doing. Be completely open and honest, and then everybody gets the information that will hopefully then prevent the accident, or if not, it will you'll have your records and your data if a claim or if an accident does happen. So it makes complete sense to go this route.
Yeah, Yeah, absolutely. As you know, it's something I've been doing for many years. What would you say are the biggest issues that you see where people get it wrong? So, you know, building operators, building managers, where do they, where do they fall down, for want of a better term, when it comes to slip risk?
Not understanding it in the first place. Okay. So in Ireland, it's only in the last couple of years that PTV is becoming the go-to as opposed to R ratings.
Yeah.
Everybody you spoke to in the past in Ireland, oh, we've always used R ratings. That's what we work on and all that. And we try to explain to them you can't test an R rating once it's down. It's a German standard. It's not our standard. You should be using VS79 or EN 13036. Yeah. So getting the correct information across has been probably the hardest thing. There was a lot of, again, pardon the pun, a lot of resistance at the beginning. Yeah. It certainly turned the corner on that. Pendulum testing is, as I say, we're on construction sites the whole time. So architects are now understanding that it's PTV that's needed. Yeah. Construction firms now understanding that. Councils that initially would have been probably one of the slowest on the uptake are certainly heavily involved now in requesting PTV. So things have turned a corner in terms of how they should be measuring their risk. Yeah. And then obviously the same issues occur in Ireland as they do in England. You can start off with a very good floor, so a low risk, high PTV, maintenance, cleaning, training, proper equipment. So the same issues will be occurring obviously in the UK as they do in Ireland. Yeah. You can't, so many people think we've started off with a low risk floor, job done. Yeah. Job's not done. It's maintain, record.
Yeah. I've been working with, we mentioned the UK Slip Resistance Group, and there's a bunch of us there that are working on a cleaning document at the moment. So how, the principles of cleaning as it relates to slip resistance, and yeah, that's one of the key points that we've trying to underline in very thick black ink in that document is you can't assume that just because a floor's got a texture to it, it's anti-slip, but secondly, or slip resistant, but secondly, even if you start life with a slip resistant floor, as you say, with a high PTV, a low slip risk, it doesn't mean it's going to stay that way if you don't clean it effectively.
No, if anything, you're going to see the PTV decrease a lot quicker because you're starting off with a high level of friction, so therefore it's going to hold the contaminant. So you've got to start your cleaning routine from day one. Yeah.
What about sort of footwear and some of the other factors? Are people a bit better informed on that, would you say?
We don't supply footwear. We would recommend a couple of companies that obviously would know the rules and regulations. I obviously have an understanding of it. Again, a lot of companies would just push their employees to go to the local hardware stores and they're asking for safety footwear. It's understanding, Christian. People think safety footwear means an anti-slip sole. It generally doesn't. So and I think some of the fear is if you specify the footwear, it then becomes PPE.
Yeah, you've got to pay for
PPE, you've got to supply it. So it's getting the happy balance between providing the right information and pushing people towards the right products and keeping the company costs down. So many things come down to cost at the end of the day. But then if you look at the cost of a claim, the cost of an accident, the implications of an accident, it doesn't quantify not providing the right information, in my opinion.
And that to me is one of, I guess there are two big, are there just two? But that's certainly one of the big issues, is that people don't understand the true cost of an accident, because they think of it as it's a claim and it's going to be £10,000, let's say, in the UK, but that's okay because my insurance company covers that. But they don't consider, well, every claim you get, adds to your premium the next time around, on the one hand, but they also don't consider that the insurance only covers a certain proportion of the cost. You know, it doesn't cover you having to pay for extra staff to come in. You know what I mean? It doesn't cover your investigation costs. It doesn't cover some of your legal costs, etc., etc. So actually, people's perception of, you know, it doesn't cost us anything if we have an accident is just totally wrong. And I think until we get that point across, it's always going to be difficult to get people to invest.
Well, I think thanks to yourself and some of your guests, Christian, we all have a lot more understanding of what the true costs of an accident are.
Yeah.
Where, as I say, we're working with insurance companies ourselves now, and we're trying to get an understanding of what the true costs are in Ireland as well. It's not easy to get that information.
Yeah, that's one of the challenges, isn't it? Because HSE here in the UK would give you their accident iceberg and say that the uninsured cost of an accident could be between 8 and 36 times the insured cost. But obviously, it's going to vary hugely by sector. We did some research a couple of years ago on LinkedIn, and we had about 120, I think, health and safety managers or health and safety directors. We asked the question, you know, what for you is the range? And they said on average between 10 and 12 times. So in other words, your 10 grand claim is there's 100 grand of extra costs. But a lot of companies just don't know those numbers.
No, because do they look into it in the minute detail, you know, to get the understanding? It's almost accepted that there's going to be costs involved, but you should know them costs. You should have a clear understanding. But people don't like to talk about slip accidents. It's almost, it's hush hush.
I do.
Yeah. And I do, but have you not noticed even when you're talking to your own clients, okay? Because you can't prevent slip accidents 100%, okay? So even if you're dealing with a client, you've reduced their frequency of slip accidents, but one does happen. When you want to engage and talk about it, it's almost hush hush. Like, is anybody looking? Let's make sure. It's nothing to be ashamed about. It's an issue that needs to be dealt with. But you can only deal with it if you talk openly and honestly about it, and assess it, and retest, and look at what's changed on the flooring. You know, it shouldn't be a topic that can't be openly discussed.
No, I mean, I haven't done this for some time because you always get the same answer. But if you ring someone up, you know, let's say out of the blue, and you say, oh, you know, this is what I do, and do you suffer from slip and fall accidents? You know, even if they work for a big supermarket where they have thousands of them a year, they'd always say no. Yeah. Because there's this kind of, we don't want to, I don't know, we don't want to open this can of worms. It's a bit like, you know, pendulum testing. I've had so many cases over the years where people don't want to get the testing done because they worry that if they have the testing done, it's going to be a smoking gun, and it's going to be proof that they've got a problem, and then they're going to have to deal with the problem. Whereas actually right now they know they've got the problem, but they're just putting their head in the sand.
Yeah, I mean, a few years back, we were doing testing for a large tile supplier, but they only wanted to test the tiles they knew were going to achieve 36 plus. Although they were still supplying, let's say, the high gloss tiles for kitchens and bathrooms, I said, well, you've got this the wrong way round.
Yeah.
You need to be testing the tiles, all the tiles, the full range, because if you're pushing these high gloss porcelain tiles for a kitchen and an accident happens, if you haven't given that information to your customer, it falls back on you anyway. You know, because you're saying they're suitable for a bathroom. You should be saying to them, no, the PTV in this tile is 16, let's say, in wet conditions. At least then they know that they've got a high risk flooring that they need to manage and maintain. Yeah. Only supplying it for the ones you know are going to pass. That I don't get that. I don't understand that at all. Yeah. So it's again, we might lose sales. Yeah, you might, but you won't lose that many sales because people love their high gloss tiles anyway. Yeah. But
And
what
everyone
you're doing
knows.
is you're giving the right information from the starting point, and then how that customer deals with it, that's up to them. But they know the risk.
Yeah, and I think people obviously don't. People have a short-term view as well, don't they? So you could say, well, we might lose some sales, but actually, would you lose more sales by giving the correct information, or would you lose more sales if, as happens several times a year, someone slips over in a bathroom and cracks their head and dies, and they then go in the press, their family goes in the press and blames your tiles. You're going to lose many more sales that way, I would have thought.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to name the company, but I believe they did have a claim against them at one point, and they lost a fair bit of money that way, by not giving the right information.
Yeah.
You go into most tile shops. How often do you see the PTV advertised when you're walking around?
Very rarely.
You'll see our values sometimes, but you won't see PTV.
No.
And the same comes, but I know you had Christopher Hackett on a while back from Sensec.
Yeah.
They supply the information. That should be across the board.
Yeah.
Don't hide it. Don't hide it.
No, it's certainly better mirroring your experience, I guess, over the last few years. It's better in the UK now than it was when I first got involved in this world, but it's still, there's still a long way to go, I would suggest, because we still find, you turn up to a site and it's about to open and it's hotel bathrooms, and they've put, as you say, a high gloss tile on the floor, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, we haven't thought about this, it's going to be slippery. And then it's much more costly to treat those tiles retroactively than it would be just to choose the right tile and put it down on the floor in the first place. Yeah,
exactly. Look, the way it's gone as well, what's happening now at IC is just everyone's going 36 plus. Got to say, architects, floor specifiers, it's got to be 36 plus. I mean, and it's wrong. I know that's wrong. Is look at the building. So yes, if it's in the bathrooms, of course it would make sense 36 plus in the wet. But it's like you say, a 10th floor of an office building where there's very little risk apart from during your cleaning or what might be a spillage. Manage your risk. Yeah. I mean, some of these flooring suppliers, terrazzo suppliers, marble suppliers, they must be having a nightmare, because some of those are never going to achieve 36 plus in wet conditions. No. Unless you end up doing another process or putting a topical sealer on top. Yeah. But then you're talking quite a lot of money again. You could be 15, 20 euros a square meter on top of whatever the product has cost in the first place. Yeah. So, and also you're not then really getting the product that you wanted, are you? Because it might look like a terrazzo, but it isn't really a terrazzo. It's got a layer of resin on the top or whatever. Yeah, I mean, I'm not against high gloss flooring. I'm against using it in the wrong point of a building. And it's what we do is not rocket science. Yes, it's science, but it's not rocket science. It's common sense. Yeah, common sense. Yeah. Look at your building. Look at your, as you know, your entrance matting. Look at the risk. What's your slip risk policy like within the building? Are you on top of the game there? So, by all means, have your high gloss, but manage your risk. Yeah. Yeah. The over specification of PTV is definitely something that frustrates me, because, as you said earlier, if you start life with a very high PTV, when it's wet, it's going to be harder to clean, and actually quite rapidly that can be, what starts life as a 45 tile, PTV 45 in the wet tile, very low risk when wet, can become a PTV 20 in a high risk, within a matter of weeks, because it's the dirt is kind of sticking to it and clinging to it, and unfortunately most people just don't know how to clean, so these floors degrade quite quickly. Yeah, I mean, I remember testing an external polished concrete, so it was very good in the wet. I think it was late 50s, early 60s, wet PTV, but they planted some small trees along the avenue. Within a matter of months, the sap from the trees had completely contaminated the flooring, they had to close that length of footpath, and it was purely down to the sap. I think it went down to 26 within a matter of weeks.
Yeah, and
So,
it doesn't matter what floor you put down there; any floor would suffer if from that kind of contamination, wouldn't it?
yeah, I mean, there was nothing wrong with the floor that was specified. In fact, it looked lovely, very safe. Again, keep it clean, maintain it. You know, a lot of what we do is repetition, because it's the same advice, slightly tweaked for different environments.
Yeah.
But it is quite simple and quite easy to adhere to advice.
Yeah. Well, it is, but yet it seems to be quite difficult to get people to do it.
Yeah, because I don't know. Is it a case of some people feel like you're teaching them how to suck eggs? We know how to deal with our flaws and everything else. They obviously don't, because of so many of the flaws that I assess or you assess are just badly maintained.
Yeah.
We done a pool clean last night. There was nothing wrong with the floor. The inherent slip resistance to the floor. Actually, you've done well to get me. I was on the night shift last night. The inherent slip resistance of the floor was very good. So it isn't always a case of overselling and doing your anti-slip treatment, whatever type of treatment you're going to do or proposing to do. A lot of the time, it is down to contamination removal.
Yeah. So that point actually brings me on to we wanted to discuss a few of our sort of bugbears, and that would be one of them, wouldn't it? Going back to that discussion we had about the independent slip test people would be saying you don't want to trust anybody that's selling you a solution, and unfortunately the sad fact of the matter is there's some truth to that, because there are plenty of cowboys out there that will oversell an anti-slip treatment. They'll come in and slip test a floor, they won't clean it and then say, well, actually I just need to clean it, it's a contamination problem. They'll slip test it when it's filthy and say, oh, it's slippery, yeah, definitely need an anti-slip treatment here, and then whack in a big bill.
Yeah, whack in a big bill. But I think what annoys me even more is the over promise of how long it's going to last.
Yeah.
Anybody that says that there's a treatment being done on your floor, there's 3 years warranty, you're safe, you're fine, or 5-year warranty, they're not telling the truth. Right. Okay, because there's any floor that's being treated within a matter of days, months, weeks, there'll be a deterioration if you haven't advised that client how to maintain that floor. It's not always about selling them cleaning chemicals, but it is about looking at what cleaning chemicals they're going to use. Look at the processes. Are they leaving it? Is it correct dilution? Is it agitation? Is there rinse down? Is there removal? Dwell time? There's so much involved in the cleaning process. It's not a hard process, but it's making sure that all them steps are followed within that process. So don't believe any anti-slip service provider that says that there's a 3-year warranty, your floor will stay 36 plus or above for 3 years, 5 years, you don't have to do anything different.
Yeah.
They're bullshitting you.
Yeah.
and you know what I mean? That's the truth.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and if you think about it logically, like we've already said, take your example of the walkway. Well, that was a 65 or whatever, 60 plus in the wet floor, but quite soon it was 28 because of the contamination, because it wasn't cleaned and maintained. It's no different. It's one of these, and it runs into another challenge that I face quite often, and with people's misunderstanding is, well, we'll just replace the floor. But that doesn't solve the problem either, because you can replace the floor or treat the floor, but if you still continue to not clean it effectively, then it's going to become slippery. It doesn't matter what's down on the floor.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that particular one I was talking about, all that required was some periodic power washing at certain times of the year. It wasn't even, it didn't even have to be all the time, every month. It was only when the sap was on those trees.
Yeah. So
it's not always going to be the most costliest thing to maintain that floor.
No.
And then obviously you've got staff training. Has the right equipment been supplied? timing. I think timing is one of the biggest issues, especially within leisure centres. I feel sorry for the staff sometimes because they're expected to maintain a, let's say, an average pool deck and changing room, let's say 300 square meters. Okay, might be 2 staff. I could not do 300 square meters properly in an hour or 2 hours, which is if they're given that. Most of them are probably given about an hour, and you might have a night cleaner come in, but that night cleaner is doing the windows, they're doing the toilets, they're doing the mirrors. It takes us on average 2 to 3 men. We might be lucky to do, say, let's say 200 square meters, probably.
Exactly, yeah. Same as us. You know, we would always work on about 200 square meters a night for 2 or 3 people.
Yeah, and we've got the right equipment, Christian. I guarantee you one
stronger
thing:
chemicals.
Your staff do not have a Kentucky mop and bucket in the back of their van. Anything but.
They definitely do not. No, and if, coming up on the podcast, I'm interviewing James and Werner from Rawlins, who talk about chop the mop. If you've come across that, but about how ineffective Kentucky mops are at cleaning floors.
Yeah, no, I first thing I ever say to clients when I see them, chuck them out, get rid of them straight away. There's no business of them being in your cleaning cupboard. I think one of the best things that people could buy is a wet vacuum. Yeah, you know, get those chemicals down on the floor, move the stuff around, get rid of it. Get rid of it. You know, and
what people don't understand is cleaning. So if you look at the definition of cleaning, it's the removal of soiling or contamination from a surface. So people talk about cleaning chemicals, but actually that's an oxymoron because chemicals don't clean anything. Chemicals will loosen the dirt, but the cleaning bit is the rinsing or the removal, as you say, with the wet vacuum or hosing it off or whatever it might be. And that just doesn't happen. It's certainly not in great enough frequency from everything I've seen over the last 10 years.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. It doesn't. Yeah, chemicals is the wrong thing for me to say. It's the process. It's not necessarily what you're using as a process. Yeah. If it's successful, then there's nothing wrong with what you're doing. If you're keeping those contaminants from being on the floor, then you're doing a good job.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
But timing. I mean, how can you give 1 or 2 members of staff an hour to clean 200, 300 square meters?
Yeah, I know. Yeah. I mean, I went to a leisure centre recently, and it was really bad in terms of the cleanliness. I didn't do a slip test, but I'm pretty sure it would have not done very well on the slip test just because of the level of contamination. And I put a quote in to do a deep clean, and the guy basically said, "Oh, well, we're never going to pay that can't afford to pay that to get it cleaned." And I turned around and said, "Well, but how, you've saved multiples of this amount over the last 5 years by not cleaning it properly. So, you've already had the benefit of that. You've saved, 100 grand probably of what, if you've been trying to if you kept it clean, perfectly clean, it would have cost you 100 grand to keep it clean. And you're saying you don't want to spend 5 grand on cleaning it now to get it back to brand new." It's just crazy.
It makes me. I love swimming pools. It's our bread and butter work. They're not easy to maintain, and if they are left to go too far, yourself, the calcium and the lime scale, the hydrochloride build up and everything else. It's one of the toughest materials known to man to remove once it's gone too far. And I suppose in some ways that was one thing I noticed during COVID. Pools were closed for a long time, so your daily cleaning or even the transfer of water from people to keep dirt moving and everything else wasn't happening. So the ingrained dirt or the lap over from the pool allowed for the build up to happen over a longer period of time.
Yeah.
So a lot of our clients, because we'd have repeat clients on contracts, and I know you've gone down that route lately. A lot of our pools, when they eventually reopened, were harder for us than they would have been pre-lockdown.
Yeah.
Took an extra night, some of them, and things like that.
Yeah, which makes sense. Yeah, makes sense. Anything else you wanted to get off your chest, Richard?
No, just the normal procedures and everything else. Obviously, the bane of all our lives, the slalom around yellow wet floor signs, and how people feel that that's their get out of jail card, when you rightly highlighted recently about the case in the UK, Stanley, I think his name was, wasn't it? Yeah, misuse of wet floor signs. Just cop on, lads. You know, there's and ladies, there's different ways to warn people of risk than just thinking putting 15 floor signs out in a petrol forecourt service area is the right way to do it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a question I've asked some of the lawyers on the podcast before, is, you know, are they helpful or not? And their answer is always they can be helpful, but only if they're used in the right way. So if you're cleaning a floor and you're putting yellow floor signs out and you're saying caution wet floor because you're in the process of cleaning the floor, that's correct. But what more often happens is, you know, you walk into an entrance of a building and there's just yellow signs because the floor's wet. Well, that's not the right use of them, and they're not helpful in that scenario at all, because all you're really doing is saying, we know there's a problem, we're not dealing with it properly, stick a claim in if you fall over.
I mean, when you look at the stats, I'm sure we're pretty similar to yourselves in the UK. Manual handling is slips, trips and falls, depending on what sector you're talking about. And in certain sectors, construction, slips, trips and falls are number one. Funny enough, offices over here, slips, trips and falls are above manual handling. I've got a manual handling cert, I'm sure you do. Every one of my staff has a manual handling cert. Every member of staff throughout the country has to have a manual handling cert. Why don't people take more notice of the slip, trips and falls? You know, we're not just banging on to get pendulum tests. There's a reason to have it done. It should be in your safety file. You should understand your risk. Spend that little bit of money to assess your floors, understand your risk. Take it more seriously than what it is taken. You know?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why one of the key things I'm doing for Sliptember this year is actually campaigning for tougher legislation. Because my view is, you know, if you look at other areas of safety, like manual handling would be a good example. You know, if we weren't as robust on manual handling, think of how many injuries we'd have. Or PAT testing would be another example. You know, if we weren't doing PAT testing, how many more would we have? You know, we had many more before. So we've proven already that with a bit slightly tougher regulation and some quantifiable testing and, you know, doing things properly in other areas of safety, you can massively reduce. And you and I both know, if you get the testing done, if you implement it, if you make the floor safer, if you do the cleaning, you can normally cut the number of accidents by 50, 60, 70%, even more sometimes. So to me, it just makes logical sense that this should be legislated more strongly.
Yeah, well, think about this point, Christian, okay, right? How many, I don't know whether you've ever been working in one building for a long period of time, okay, but if you have, did you ever see a fire or a fire risk or a near miss happen with a fire? Chances are you didn't, okay? But you probably would have known somebody within that building that had a slip accident or a near miss of a slip and everything else. Yeah, and I'm not trying to quantify slips against fire, okay? But what I'm saying is, you have your fire alarm in place. Now, over here, you've got L1 systems, which is the highest rated system, I believe. But so you've got the system in place. You have your annual check by your fire officer. You have your quarterly checks by your external contractor. You more than likely have weekly checks, monthly checks, daily checks. But on top of that as well, the system itself is checking itself. So every time you look up and you see one of them smoke heads, fire detectors, you'll see that little red light go off. That's pulsing, that's checking itself. So every minute, I believe it is, that system is being checked. Okay, so then you say, well, where's your slip risk report? Where's your pendulum test of these different types of flooring?
What's that?
Nothing. All right, so where the level of risk is actually quite high. I mean, everyone's got to walk on the floor at some point. Yeah, it's not given the same kudos in the pecking order of risk assessments and dealing with the same.
Yeah, and that's why I do what I do, and I do the podcast, and I do the articles, and I do everything, because it's just trying to raise that awareness and get it front of mind, as it's because it is important, and it's got to stop being overlooked.
Yeah. And I think it's proven very successful for you, and fair play to you. But I genuinely do believe that engaging with the insurance companies and bringing everyone together is the right way to go.
Yeah.
Because if they're pushing the right information to their clients, it's a win-win.
Yeah, no, it is. And interestingly, one of my other podcast interviews this month will be with a lady called Amber, who works for Liberty Insurance in the US, and obviously they're massive, because you said about how much bigger the UK is to Ireland, but obviously the US is 7 or 8 times bigger than the UK. Yeah. She actually specializes in slip and trip risk management work within an individual insurer, which obviously I've never seen, certainly not in the UK. I'm sure that doesn't exist in Ireland as well. So we're going to be getting an insurer perspective from her, which I think will be really interesting.
Okay, and then you'll probably have the debate over what's the best standard for testing the floors.
Oh, I don't know if I want to be too controversial, because obviously in America they don't. Well, as I understand it, every state has different. There's no federal sort of guidance for slip testing. Every state does different things. So we're kind of lucky, I suppose, that at least we've got the HSE and is it the HSL in Ireland?
HSA.
HSA, that's it, yeah. To sort of say, well, this is how we want it to be done. So that does make life a little bit easier. But as you said earlier, even then, people are still getting it wrong. But yeah, if it's a hodgepodge of every state doing things differently, that's particularly difficult. But no, I'm going to be talking to Amber about, how similar kind of conversation about, where does she see the risks? What do the insurance companies think? How do they work with clients, etc.? So I think that'll be an interesting one as well.
Yeah, I mean, as you know, certain countries are a lot stronger in their standards. I mean, Australia springs to mind in terms of how they set their guidelines and their standards, what types of testing should be used. I know Canada does a lot of research into slip risk. It would be helpful if there was one method of testing across the world, but it's never going to happen, I don't believe.
No.
Too many different factors come into play then. And then going back to product testing and helping in construction, there's standards within standards, So if it's pavements or sets and things like that, what are the guidelines for testing them? It's not just always a matter of getting the pendulum out and swinging it. You've got to have a certain amount of samples that have to be tested from a certain batch. So there's a lot of factors that comes into play with slip resistance.
And that's one of the really fascinating things about this, about what you and I do, I think, is that the perception is that it's very simple, and in reality it is very simple, but actually there's a hell of a lot of depth that sits behind it as well. So it isn't quite as simple as it might seem, if you know what I mean. So I think
no, definitely. I mean, yeah, can anybody operate a pendulum? Yeah, on the whole, but it's understanding the rules and the guidelines, and how far do you want to go into understanding the chosen field you're in, and how much advice do you want to help or give, not help, how much advice do you want to give to your clients?
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah.
Have you found that certain sectors are slower on the uptake? I mean, we don't have a lot of engagement with schools, nursing homes.
Yeah, I'd say that's similar. I tend, before the pandemic, like you said, I think a lot of our work was in leisure and hospitality. But I think there's two reasons. There's one key reason for that, which is that they have the benefit of cleanliness and safety. So in other words, they get two benefits from what we can do for them. Whereas in a school or a nursing home, yeah, of course, there is a benefit to it being cleaner, but it's not the same commercial benefit to be cleaner that you get in a leisure club, where there's a lot of evidence to show that if you're cleaner, you sell more memberships, and therefore you have more revenue and more profit, if you know what I mean. It's a bit like manufacturing, let's say. Again, they get the benefit of the slip side of things, but if it's food manufacturing, of course, they have to be clean and hygienic. But if it's kind of,
but they would also be very well managed.
Yeah.
So the slip risk policies in place would be much better than within a school, or within a nursing home. I mean, if you think about it, a slip in a nursing home can be catastrophic.
Absolutely, yeah. I saw some research. It was probably 10 years ago now, but it said, and this wasn't slips, but it was falls of all kinds. It was something like 50% or 50 to 60% of nursing home residents fell every year. And if you did fall, 80% of them or more would fall another time. And as you say, when you're that old, the body is more brittle and more, more bad things are likely to happen to you. So yeah,
a hip injury or a pelvis injury, and that, I mean, it becomes very, very serious.
Well, it's like the Tesco fine in early 2020. The guy who, I think he was 90 or 92 or something, and he slipped and broke his hip in Hemel Hempstead Tesco. And they were fined 733,000 criminal fine.
Yeah.
And when you think of it, well, it's kind of only, in inverted commas, a broken hip. But when you're that age, broken hip is life altering. Could actually lead to, that could have been the end of his life. Really, he could have been bedbound for the rest of his life, or could be bedbound for the rest of his life. I'm not sure whether what's happened to him since. But so yeah, the older you are, you're more prone to fall over, or to slip and then not be able to stop yourself from falling, if you know what I mean, because we can all slip but self-address to not fall. But also, yeah, your injuries are going to be much worse as well.
Well, the chances are in the nursing home, the staff are hopefully going to be wearing the correct footwear.
Yeah.
So that's it's then the person who's at risk. But in a school, kids are going to wear any type of footwear. Every school you go into is a high polished vinyl floor.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
So, the sector that gets me, and I'm hoping to have somebody very senior from this sector on the podcast soon, so I won't be too scathing, is supermarkets, because we all know that they have huge amounts of slips and falls, and we all know that they polish their floors to high heaven, and we all know that polished floors are slippery, and you just think, well, 2 and 2 seems to add up to 12 rather than up to 4. It just doesn't make sense to me. And they don't seem to want to engage.
It's the acceptance that slips are inevitable. Is it factored into their costs, on their yearly costs? We're going to have so many slips from their historical data, if they have historical data. No, but it's a silly way. It's a way of throwing money away, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think it's also like in these bigger companies where you've got, particularly public companies, where the management team are incentivized on the short-term kind of share price. They're trying to cut costs here and now rather than look to save in the future. So, putting in place treatments and programs and whatever to reduce accidents, which is going to save you money over the next 3 years, is not maybe not in their interest personally.
No, but it comes back to correct flooring specification, wear tests. What's it going to be like in 5-10 years time? If that's being factored in, so that goes into more technical analysis. So and there is definitely more that can be done.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Great. Well, Richard, I'm conscious of time because we've had a good natter, which is good, but don't want to keep you for too long. Do you want to give us all any plugs or links or articles or websites or YouTubes or whatever you've got where people can find out more, and particularly if they're in Ireland and want some help?
Okay, well, as I said at the beginning, this is outside of my comfort zone, so I don't do a lot of podcasts and blogs and things like that. We do obviously have the website, so totalslipsolutions.ie. We're on LinkedIn. I engage somewhat on LinkedIn. Again, not too much, but I hope to be more on the ball with that going forward. So thank you very much for inviting me onto this, Christian. Hopefully I've said something that might be worth listening to for some of your listeners. If not, apologies, folks.
No, it's been good. Great to get your perspective, and you're very hands-on, more hands-on than me nowadays. You know, I'm a bit less hands-on than I was in the past. So it's good to.
Maybe I'm just a control freak, Christian.
I'm hands-on in lots of other ways, but
saying that, mate, I'm getting older, so I don't know how much longer I'll be.
Yeah, I definitely wasn't out doing a night shift in the swimming pool last night anyway, that's for sure. Although saying that, I did, my alarm went off at 4:30 yesterday morning to drive down to Bristol, so I was doing a long day, but during the day rather than overnight.
Well, there you go.
Yeah,
well, look, as I say, thanks very much for the invite. Happy to talk anytime, and if anybody wants advice in Ireland or further afield, feel free to contact me. Always happy to talk, sometimes to bore about slip resistance.
Good stuff. Well, thanks, Richard, and thanks everybody for joining us today. This was the first of the Sliptember podcast episodes, and Sliptember, if you're not familiar with it, it's a campaign that I run every September just to raise awareness about slip safety. And if you're in the UK, and we can help you with some slip testing, which is, as you've heard in today's conversation, is probably the best way to get started to learn more about where your risks lie and what you can do about them. We're actually giving away £50,000 worth of slip tests in Sliptember, and there's various ways that you can win those. So check out the LinkedIn and other social media platforms, and you can find details there. Thanks for joining us anyway, and we'll see you next week with another Sliptember themed podcast episode. Cheers.
Thanks, Christian.